Sorry, Trumplicans, but no matter how hard you try, no matter how hard Mike Cuck Pence tried the other night, you can't pretend Donald Trump's flaws away. As Ben Shapiro points out this morning at nationalreview.com, the delusion that leads so many to fall in love with a fantasy Trump is dangerous. In fact, Shapiro has a close friend who was recently dating a nasty fellow. He manipulated her emotionally. He drove a wedge between her and her family. He bad-mouthed her beliefs, tearing her down to build himself up. But she continued to date him because apparently, for whatever reason, she loved him. She didn't love the real him, of course. That guy was an asshole. She loved the fantasy she had created for herself. It's bizarre to realize that for large swaths of the Republican Party, Donald Trump has become the abusive boyfriend. We've now watched Trump operate for well over a year. He hasn't changed one iota, jot, or tittle during that time. He's always been a man who says terrible things in defense of terrible ideas, who lets his ego run roughshod over whatever shred of self-control he maintains, who cares far more about insults to his ego than about the country he seeks to lead, purports to lead. But that's not the Trumplicans see. They see someone different entirely. They see a blow-up doll they could fall in love with so long as they're able to convince themselves he feels real. I gotta remember that, ladies and gentlemen. Trumplicans are in love with a blow-up doll. That's just tacky enough to fit Trump, isn't it? Just tacky enough a metaphor to fit the real Trump. And never was that more apparent than during Tuesday night's vice presidential debate, when Indiana Governor Mike Cuck Pence set about describing fantasy Trump, a character he could support sans compunction and sans reckoning with the manifest ugliness of reality Trump. Pence called Tim Kaine's accurate claim that Trump had called for deportation of all illegal aliens nonsense. Again, the miracle of digital audio and video. I mean, it's not like you can't prove this stuff. He called Vladimir Putin the small and bullying leader of Russia, and when Kaine questioned him about Trump's obvious warmth toward Putin, his bromance with the Russian dictator, he claimed he was offended. He tut-tutted, "Oh, please, come on," when Kaine noted, again, accurately, that Trump had called NATO obsolete, said he knew more than the generals did, and said that more nations should have nuclear weapons. When Kaine ran through the list of horribly offensive things Trump has said, from his Miss Universe insults to his Mexican judge comments, Pence simply pretended that the incidents in question had never happened, like we discussed yesterday. Quote, "If Donald Trump had said all of the things that you've said he said and the way you said he said them, he still wouldn't have a fraction of the insults that Hillary Clinton leveled when she said that half of our supporters were a basket of deplorables." So, one justified the other? That seems to be what Pence is saying. First, he denies that Trump said all the things that he said, and then he says, well, Hillary said bad stuff too. Aren't we supposed to be better than that? Again, as we're going to see in the next video, Trump is distracting from all the reasons why Hillary Clinton should never get to the White House, and if facing any other actual Republican candidate, she never would have. I mean, Mrs. Clinton's comments were insulting. Absolutely they were. But there was no if regarding Trump. He said all the things that Kane pointed out, reminded the audience, and reminded Governor Mike Cuck Pence about. Now, some of this is politics, but, tribalism. But the determination by many of Trump's voters to whitewash the man in order to vote for him, well, it should be astounding, but by this time it's quite clear that it's far more depressing than that. An alternative universe has been constructed where Trump's worst sins never happened, where anyone who refuses to back the lifelong big government statist with a historic penchant for dishonesty is somehow a traitor to conservatism, instead of Trump supporters who have betrayed conservatism by following and selling out to Trump. Some of the thinkers I used to most admire fall into this category. People who construct their own fantasy Trump with whom to fall in love. These are the people who suggest that Trump must talk more about judges, like his pro-abortion or partial birth abortion zealot sister, Marianne Trump Berry, or his homosexual pal, the CEO of PayPal. Oh, and he must talk about Obamacare. No, you ever notice Trump? When's the last time Trump said anything about Obamacare? That's what propelled the GOP wave elections of 2010 and 2014. Is Trump talking about Obamacare? When's the last time? Sometime way back in the primaries, months ago? Oh, and the specifics of Clinton's Egypt policy. And of course, the common thread running through all that is Trump, as we talked about, as we discussed in one of the videos yesterday, Trump doesn't deal in details. He doesn't know anything. He's the guy who shows up, puts his face and his name out there, but doesn't actually do anything. I mean, at least when Trump was going bankrupt, squandering his father's real estate empire, at least he was actually he wasn't working, but he was actually sort of doing something. And that was 20 years ago. Donald Trump has not done anything for 20 years. He's been an indolent trust fund baby. An elderly, indolent trust fund baby. That's what he is. Born with a silver spoon in his mouth, never worked a day in his life. I mean, if there's anybody in the country who is more out of touch with how ordinary Americans live, it's Donald Trump. I mean, if there's Donald Trump epitomizes that. He epitomizes being out of touch. He didn't earn his fortune, he inherited it and then squandered it. I mean, the only reason that he is still in the top 1% today is because he's created this cartoon character that so many Republicans have tragically fallen delusionally in love with. But Trump doesn't deal in details, remember? He doesn't know anything. He's ignorant. He's an ignoramus. He's lazy. I mean, he has no leadership qualities. None of the qualities, character traits that you would actually want in somebody sitting in the Oval Office. I mean, policy chops, that's not who Trump is. Trump is the guy who couldn't name the countries bordering Egypt. By the way, for those of you in Murrieta, California, Libya, Sudan, Israel. Trump is the guy who once heard a rumor from a Breitbart commentator that Hillary stashes a lesbian lover in Egypt. That's Trump. Playing Henry Higgins to Trump's Eliza Doolittle, that's appropriate, is one thing if Trump learns to enunciate properly. It's entirely another thing if Trump's Eliza Doolittle instead decides to disregard speaking entirely in barroom curses, and conservative Higginses insist that everyone at the ball acknowledge Trump as a princess anyway. Yet, that self-deception has become the rule rather than the exception. The problem is, the rule in the GOP, the problem is the rest of the country is not deceived. They see Trump for who and what he is. The Democrat critiques hit home. Though pretending Trump away may be effective as self-deception, it doesn't work at all when it comes to deceiving anyone else. But the self-deception has been so effective for many Trumplicans that they now insist that it's everyone else who's delusional, that those who won't support Trump simply don't see him clearly. The cult of personality, ladies and gentlemen. They don't know the real meaning, fantasy Trump. Their criticism is hurting Trump, all because they don't understand that fantasy Trump is real. He'll appoint conservative justices. There's no evidence of this. He'll be stalwart on foreign policy. There's no evidence of this either. He's just saying all those leftist things because he wants to win. There's no evidence of that either. And why would you want somebody lying about his true conservatism? I mean, shouldn't true conservatives want their candidate to go out there and sell conservative ideas? Why is it a good thing for someone who's supposedly a true blue conservative to go out there and pretend to be a liberal? Well, I mean, whatever happened to Tea Party ideological purism? The purity fetish that used to define the Tea Party. Whatever happened to that? Oh, we're going to stop Hillary with somebody just as bad as she is. I mean, I still don't get the logic of that. Now, hence the disconnect between conservatives who won't support Trump, in other words, real conservatives, true conservatives, and those who spend an outsized chunk of time ripping us. Many Trumplicans, those who see his flaws and will vote for him anyway, and really, when you stop and think about it, that's even more pathetic. That's even more treacherous. Because how can you see what Donald Trump is and that he's just as bad as, if not worse than Hillary Clinton, and vote for him anyway? If you see and you recognize what Donald Trump is, and you vote, and you don't recoil from both candidates, from both Hillary and Trump, then you're not a real conservative. I'm sorry, you're not. You've sold out. I mean, the people who are delusional, I mean, there's something wrong with them between the ears. But for those who see Trump's flaws, who recognize that Trump is a New York liberal con man who is just as bad as Hillary Clinton, and you're going to vote for him anyway, you may as well be voting for Hillary. You know, I mean, anybody who supports Trump, who supports Donald Trump, you are the ones who are really for Hillary. Bottom line. But the advocates for fantasy Trump truly cannot understand why any conservative would oppose him. That's what I mean about something wrong between the ears, mental disorder. Here's an example. In 1965, William F. Buckley ran for mayor of New York on the Conservative Party ticket against the Republican Party favorite John Lindsay, a New York liberal just like Donald Trump, who ended up winning. This is New York, remember. Lindsay refused to back Barry Goldwater in 1964, just like Donald Trump attacked and continues to attack every true conservative. If there are still any left in the Republican Party, they haven't left after the party left them, us. Lindsay refused to back Barry Goldwater in 1964, mirrored the Democrats' record on virtually every issue, just like Donald Trump, and ran with the support of the leftmost party in the state. Nonetheless, a Lindsay supporter wrote to Buckley decrying his plan to run. It seems to me that we, the members of a minority party, must unite in one purpose. Oh, we've got to I don't remember who the Democrat candidate for mayor of New York was in 1964 or 1960. What was it? 1965? Yeah, 1965. That's not the point. The point is that this Lindsay supporter was saying, we've got to stop the Democrat, even though the Republican candidate, John Lindsay, was just as bad, if not worse. Starting to sound familiar yet? Party must unite in one purpose, namely to strengthen the Republican Party and to get Republicans elected, no matter what they stand for. I believe that as soon as the campaign dust settles and Lindsay enters upon his mayoral duties, he will turn out to be a good Republican. Faith-based voting. Blind faith. Here was Buckley's response. I have a much higher opinion of John Lindsay than you. He is not the hypocrite you suppose, who will suddenly discover sound principles on arriving at high office. It is my judgment that John Lindsay will do as much harm to the Republican Party if he is elected and becomes powerful as anyone who has threatened the party's role as a defender of the tablets in recent history. If the Republican Party is transformed in his image, I shall give you the Republican Party and go elsewhere. Put another way, what's more insidious, Trumplicans? The enemy within or the enemy outside the gate? I mean, at least the enemy outside the gate is identifiable. You know that enemy, and everybody, within the gate knows that they're the enemy, and you got to oppose them. You got to fight them. What about the enemy within? What about the enemy that has convinced a large portion of the people within the walls that he's their champion? He's one of them when he's not. That's why talk about willful self-delusion. That's exactly what this is. Willful self-delusion. Suicidal. Politically, ideologically suicidal willful self-delusion. They've sold out. You've sold out, Trumplicans. All of you. Of whatever camp. You betrayed everything you ever claimed to stand for. Buckley was right, by the way. Lindsay ended up being a disastrous mayor, governing from the hard left while maintaining his Republican Party membership. He presided over the near destruction of America's largest city. Fantasy Lindsay did not exist. And fantasy Trump does not either. Trump is Trump. A powerful personality with an agenda and a plan all his own, and an agenda and a plan indistinguishable from Hillary Clinton's. Pretending him away is delusional and dangerous. If he's going to be elected, at least let's be honest about what he is and what he isn't. And here's a better idea. Don't elect him. Heather Wilhelm, NationalReview.com, joins this Never Trump Thursday morning party, making reference to the GOP's Trumpian escape fantasies. Now, this is... desperation leads to enhanced creativity, is especially when one's ego is as threatened as Trumplicans' egos are, as their ship, their Cheeto Jesus goes down for the third time. Despite Republican or desperate Republicans pretend that their presidential nominee is not who he is. I'm noticing a theme developing here. Now, as an opinion columnist, Miss Wilhelm writes, I get boatloads of interesting emails. Many are insightful. Some are touching, some are hilarious, a few are a bit testy, as in profane, no doubt. Written in all caps! But lately, just 1 month away from the woebegone 2016 presidential election, it's been discovered that there is a new species of email, which has popped up sui generis like a tragic Venus rising from the sea. This is really good. You're going to understand what I mean by creativity in just a moment. Brace yourself, for perhaps you've seen it too. It's the vote for Donald Trump because he's so nightmarish he's sure to get impeached, and then we'll have Mike Pence as president email. Remember what I said in yesterday's video? I've said it for years because it's true, that people don't vote for the bottom of the ticket, they vote for the top. And really, despite all the good points about Mike Cuck Pence that I'm going to make in the next video, fact still remains he sold out to Trump. Fact still remains he is delusional about Trump. And that brings Mike Cuck Pence's judgment into serious disrepute. I mean, if Mike Cuck Pence is such a terrible judge of character that he could actually ride shotgun with Donald J. Trump, then I'm not so sure I'd want him in the White House either, quite honestly. Anyway, once a shy creature, this plucky digital mutation, remember, mutations are either neutral or they're bad. There's no such thing as a good mutation. Now boasts several colorful variations. There's the Mike Pence will be Trump's shadow president email. In other words, Trump will just sit in the White House residence and tweet all the time, and Mike Pence, he'll delegate the actual running of the country to Mike Pence. In other words, like, Trump would be the CEO, the face of the company, and Pence would be his COO, Chief Operating Officer. Nice concept. It's not the way the Constitution works. The president is the president. The president of the United States is the head of state, head of government, chief executive officer, chief operating officer, chief financial officer, chief. The vice president is the president of the Senate. That's it. Constitutionally speaking, that's the only role the vice president has. The vice president becomes president upon the incapacitation, via the 25th Amendment, or the death of the current sitting president. Otherwise, he's president of the Senate to cast tie-breaking votes in the Senate, and that's it. So this is not constitutional. It's not the way the Constitution works, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, and then there's the, come on, Trump just wants to play president on TV so he won't make any trouble email. But he wants to make trouble. That's who Donald Trump is. That's what Donald Trump is. He is a troublemaker. Anything to get the cameras, anything to get the attention on and keep it on him. It's one of the reasons why he goes out and says outrageously stupid things. and outrageously offensive things too. Or occasionally the very dark, quietly terrible Trump's 70. He's old. He might die in office, and then we get Mike Pence as president email. No, that really exists. Please don't add to that. Besides, Trump's, like I said in one of yesterday's videos, Trump is the kind of person that he's just like Bill Clinton, just like Barack Obama. They're going to live to be 100. Trump is not going to die in office. Good grief. Bob Dole ran for president 20 years ago, and people were talking about, well, he'll die in office. Bob Dole is still around 20 years later, so, I mean, but Trump's not going to die in office. Trump's going to live another 30 years. People like that, people who deserve to die young, never do. It's only good people that die young. So, and besides, Trump is immortal. He's going to outlive Wolverine. Just ask him. Now, these missives represent a morphing of sorts, revealing a larger phenomenon. The sixth and perhaps, not guaranteed, but perhaps final stage of the GOP's evolving Trumpoid grief. Let's call it the Trumpoid escape hatch fantasy. It's a mindset, alas, that can only lead to heartache. In 2016, it's become a bit of a cliche to map, Kubler-Ross style, the stages of Republicans coping with their ramshackle and occasionally terrifying presidential nominee. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, cuckolding. But in the age of Trump, for many good-hearted Republicans, in other words, never Trump, acceptance, well, except that we're not Republicans anymore because the GOP left us when they nominated Trump, acceptance, supposedly the final stage of grief, is simply not acceptable. That's why we're never Trump. That's why the Republican Party left us, and now we're how did Buckley put it? We've given the Republican Party to them and gone elsewhere. Well, it was ripped from our cold, dead hands, is what happened. No, this is all too bizarre, this presidential fiasco. And it was also preventable. The old model of grief will not do. Instead, like a pack of crazed Venice Beach rollerbladers, certain GOPers have blown right past the acceptance popsicle stand, which, since it's 2016, may or may not secretly sell meth, various state secrets, and new gender identities, and plowed off the sidewalk. They have toppled over, scattering various indignant seagulls, and finally settled into a new, more exciting stage, deep in the toasty, comforting sand. Goes something like this. We can vote for Trump for president, they say dreamily, but Trump won't really be president. Again, that's not how it works. Oh, it sounds compelling, certainly, but it's just as delusional. I mean, it's delusional and it's completely ludicrous. Dear Trumplicans, Donald Trump is your presidential nominee. It does not help anyone to pretend otherwise, even though Mike, trust me, maybe, oh wait, I'm running with you-know-who, or in other words, cuck Pence, valiantly tried to do just that during Tuesday's Veep debate. Confronted on national television with various questionable things Trump has done or said, his bromance with Vlad Putin, or claiming that Russia would never go into Ukraine, even though they did 2 years ago, or suggesting that everyone and his brother should get nuclear weapons, Pence merely chortled, mournfully shook his head, or outright denied that the truth is the truth. This worked smashingly until yesterday morning when the Clinton campaign constructed a snappy little video showing Trump wildly contradicting Pence's claims, and Pence at certain points contradicting himself. On various counts, it was brutal. It was likely edited amid a stream of hearty movie villain cackles from various members of La Clinta Nostra. More important, however, it provided a forecast of the potential future of the GOP under a Trumpetency. This is why Hillary Clinton's going to win. This is why Hillary Clinton was elected, for all intents and purposes, on May 3rd, back when Ted Cruz dropped out of the race and Donald Trump became presumptive GOP nominee. Because Trump is the only issue in this election. I'm going to share in the next video the multifacetedness of missed opportunities in this election cycle. I'm going to share with you how Tim Kaine was wrong on everything issue related that he spewed forth across that table on Tuesday night. But none of that matters. None of that matters because Hillary Clinton is functionally running unopposed. Donald Trump is getting Hillary Clinton elected. Donald Trump is the only issue of this election. Donald Trump has discredited, buried, destroyed the Republican Party. I talked about it yesterday about how Mike Pence, aside from his delusionalism over his running mate, wiped up the floor with Tim Kaine. But as we talked about yesterday, it's not going to matter. In fact, it's going to hurt Trump because, first of all, Pence upstaged Trump because when it came to issues, Pence knew what he was talking about, was able to humiliate Tim Kaine, and upstage Trump in the process. But none of that matters because he totally discredited himself by his delusionalism over Donald Trump. I mean, if Mike Pence wanted to be completely credible on Tuesday, he would have agreed with everything that Tim Kaine said about Donald Trump. And so that discredits everything else that he said that was correct. Nobody is going to even realize or understand that Mike Pence completely wiped up the floor with Tim Kaine on actual issues because he pissed away all his credibility on the only issue that is going to matter in this election, and that is the unfitness, the unseriousness, the unacceptability of Donald Trump. You know, when it comes to Trump escape hatch fantasies, after all, not everyone goes full impeachment. And as an aside, let's just remind you people, if you think a Republican establishment that has thus far buckled embarrassingly to Donald Trump, they're his own personal gerbil herd now, and by the way, ex-Tea Partiers, you're now on the same side as the Republican establishment. How does that feel? If you think that they're going to go to the trouble of impeaching him, barring some terrifying and dangerous development, you might want to think again. I mean, Republicans don't impeach liberal Democrats. Among certain Trumplicans, there's a far more common coping mechanism afoot. Like Mike Cuck Pence, they go around denying that Donald Trump is actually Donald Trump. Why? And why is that? because Donald Trump is indefensible. And if they admitted what Donald Trump was, they'd be admitting that they were wrong for supporting him in the first place. And you don't have to have a Trump-sized ego to have an ego strong enough to not want to admit publicly that you screwed up that badly. If it comes at all, that'll come that'll come months, years later. I like to call this phenomenon my imaginary Trump, or fantasy Trump in Ben Shapiro's parlance. It sounds like a really cute children's story, but it's actually kind of alarming. Whether Cuck Pence actually believes his own bullshit is a debate for another day. Here's the bigger point and the broader lesson of the vice presidential debate. If Trump were to win the presidency, he would pretty much own the GOP. And just like John Lindsay as mayor of New York, he would govern as far to the left as Mrs. Clinton would, or even more. I mean, he will own the GOP. He will make sure of this. The media will certainly make sure of this. But again, Trump is a liberal. Trump is a New York liberal Democrat. He's going to govern as far to the left as Hillary, if not more so, which means the GOP is going to be defending opposition policies. And what purpose would there be at that point for a GOP? What purpose would there be for it? Why do you need a Republican Party that is the Democrat Party? In every way that matters, is a practical reality, functionally, pick your descriptor, the Republican Party would be the Democrat Party. There's no more need for a Republican Party. That's why the GOP was irrelevant for almost half a century. From 1932, well, certainly a third of a century, 1932 to 1968. Totally irrelevant. Because back then, there really wasn't a dime's worth of difference between the two parties. This is the tragic irony of the 2016 cycle, that so many ex-Tea Partiers got so irrationally and misguidedly incensed with their own party that they sold out to a member of the opposition masquerading as one of them. They wanted to be fooled, and now they are supporting somebody who is indistinguishable from the candidate that they claim we have to support Trump to stop. Not to mention the fact that they're on the same side as the GOP establishment. Again, never make important decisions or any decision out of emotion, and especially not out of anger. Not healthy. And this is why. And this is what you got to understand. Trump is no shrinking violet. He will not fade into the background. He's not going to go off and play golf and let Mike Pence run the country. I mean, every step of the way, his ego has expanded as he's gotten farther into this. Maybe it was a lark in the beginning, but you think, as invested as he is in it now, do you think that he thinks he can't be the best president ever? President as he defines it, which is not how the Constitution defines it. It's more like how Barack Obama defines it. And in turn, the GOP will own all the Trump-looking debacles that come their way. And it will be a tsunami. I mean, at least, again, the enemy within is worse than the enemy outside the gate. Hillary Clinton becomes president. She's going to enter office the most unpopular. She won't have a honeymoon. She will enter office as the most unpopular president. She will start as hugely unpopular. She will be Jimmy Carter, not Barack Obama. And the right could, presumably, unify against her in opposition. That's not going to happen if Donald Trump were to win. If Donald Trump were to win, you are embracing liberal Democrat policies. You are embracing the left. You have all become progressives. And the GOP will all... In other words, we're going to get Hillary Clinton's agenda regardless. Would you rather Hillary take the blame for it or yourselves by supporting Donald Trump? That's really the issue here. That's really the question. And it's a question that's been front and center for 16 months. And too many of you Trumplicans didn't want to hear it. You're going to own Hillary Clinton's agenda. You're going to own, Sean Hannity, Hillary Clinton's Supreme Court appointments. Because Trump will make the same appointments that Mrs. Clinton will. You know, it's worth a thought experiment, particularly if you want to take the long view of what could be looming around the bend. It isn't looming around the bend, but barring Hillary Clinton, you know, dropping dead or something, or having a massive stroke or whatever. I mean, financial crisis, international turbulence, World War III, IV, whichever number it is now. Continuing interstate invasion of unsettling costumed clowns. If Hillary is president, she and the Democrats will own all of it. If Trump is president, well, we told you so. In short, Donald Trump is the Republican nominee. There is no escape hatch. It's best to accept this and then make your choice accordingly. But if you're voting for someone because you're convinced he's disastrous impeachment material, well, bleep you. Better escape hatch might just be not voting for the guy in the first place, as we will see in the next segment. We bring this video full circle at the end to David Leitch's post at Red State, reiterating the point I made earlier in this video, that no matter how thoroughly Mike Cuck Pence wiped up the stage with Tim Kaine in the vice presidential debate on Tuesday evening, his defense of Trump completely forfeits any credibility, any gains he might have gotten from that thrashing, and in the end, discredits himself and hurts Trump. Mike Pence defends make-believe Trump instead of the real Trump. That's the common thread throughout the various and sundry segments of this video. Now, it's been 2 days since the meaningless Veep debate between Senator Tim Kaine and the soon-to-be ex-governor of Indiana, Mike Cuck Pence. If you've been following the post-debate analysis of who won and who lost, you're most likely aware that many pundits gave this one to Governor Pence, though some did so guardedly. Now, in terms of actual issue substance, issues, that was true. As I say, Pence wiped up the stage with Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine looked as bad as Hillary Clinton did last week, and he wasn't going and didn't enjoy the advantage, the benefit of going up against Donald Trump. He was going against an actual Republican. But that actual Republican has been cuckolded into having to be an obsequious lying toady for the deranged yam. So that's a wash. It cancels out whatever he gained, whatever advantage, whatever ground he gained from his thrashing of Senator Kaine. Now, even MSNBC's Chris Obama gives me a thrill up my leg Matthews, or Tingle for short, gave Pence the win due to his so-called presidential demeanor. Compared to Trump, anybody just about has a presidential demeanor, when compared to Tim Kaine's childish and whiny temperament and his frequent interruptions whenever Pence was speaking. In other words, Tim Kaine was doing his Donald Trump impression. While I agree that Pence was the winner of the affair due to his demeanor and his superiority on issues, in other words, like I discussed in the other video today, the tsunami of forfeited opportunities, Trump was a complete failure on specifically his defense of the indefensible Donald Trump. That more than offset his superiority on issues. Using lies and made-up answers, Cuck Pence attempted to pretend the real Donald Trump didn't exist as he weakly defended the New York liberal con man. Here are a few examples. When Kaine accurately pointed out Trump's call for mass deportation of illegals, Pence called it nonsense. But again, through the miracle of digital audio and video, it's not a question of opinion. It's not speculative. He did say those things. When Kaine called out Trump for his controversial and dangerous man crush on Vladimir Putin, Cuck Pence responded with a weak retort about how he was offended by the accusation. But it's true. It's undeniable. If Cuck Pence is offended by it, let him de-cuck himself and drop off the ticket. When Kaine accurately challenged the Trump campaign about his threats toward NATO, calling them obsolete, his claims about how much smarter he is than the generals, and his belief that more nations should have nuclear weapons, Pence replied, "Oh, please, come on, but he said these things." He said them, and there's no reason to think he didn't mean them. Again, as we discussed in a previous segment, as Ben Shapiro noted in his piece at National Review yesterday, when Kaine ran through the list of horribly offensive things Trump has said, from Miss Universe insults to his Mexican judge comments, Cuck Pence simply pretended that the incidents in question never happened. But they did. And in the process, he makes himself look just as foolish and just as much of an obsequious lying toady as Donald Trump has actually made him. I used to respect and like Mike Pence. Not anymore. He got the issue answers devastatingly correct. That's why I say on issues, he wiped up the floor with Tim Kaine. But his judgment is horribly suspect if he could even support Donald Trump, much less serve as his caddy, ride shotgun with him. The Donald Trump that Pence defended was so imaginary, it prompted Eric Erickson to tweet during the debate, quote, "Boy, I could vote for the Donald Trump who exists in Mike Pence's mind. I just can't vote for the real Donald Trump." Many of my peers hold Cuck Pence up as a principled conservative. But as we learned last year when he caved to the Gestapo by essentially voiding the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in Indiana, forcing Christian business owners to violate their deeply held religious beliefs, yesterday's principles become today's cowardice. And today's cowardice becomes tomorrow's capitulations. Of course, when compared to Trump, a bar set somewhere in the earth's mantle, I can see how there may be those who think that Cuck Pence is the next Ronald Reagan. But during the debate, Cuck Pence proved what we all know too well. Becoming a member of Trump's inner circle will always cost you your integrity and your principles, as your character slowly and agonizingly dies. Yeah, just don't vote in the presidential election. Leave that line blank. That's what Kimberly Ross at Red State counsels this morning. As we're all painfully aware, this election cycle is unlike any other, and not in a good way. We have two incompetents standing before us. One is a criminal, the other is a con man, and a criminal. For many people on both sides of the aisle, their vote for president will boil down to deciding which candidate they can tolerate only slightly more than the other. Great job, everyone. In a nation of approximately 319 million people, only approximately 289 million of which are here legally, we're left with these two jokers. Though I don't agree with it, I can actually understand why some people will choose Donald Trump. Well, no, I can't. She might understand it, I don't. I don't agree with it, and I don't understand how anybody could choose Donald Trump instead of Hillary Clinton, or Hillary Clinton instead of Donald Trump. Two sides of the same coin. How can you... What I don't understand or agree with is how anybody could vote for either one of them. Now, those of us who figure outside of those categories are left with few options. Do we vote for someone? Anyone? Can we leave the president line blank and not feel guilt over it? Everyone must make that choice on their own. While I won't tell you, well, no, actually, I will tell you what to do at the end of this segment and video, but we'll get there. Just be patient. But Kimberly Ross does suggest this: don't vote for president this election, period. Leave it blank. But it's America! People have fought for it, and some have died for my right to vote! People have bravely fought for and died for your freedom, for your right to vote, and that includes the right to choose not to use that right. And while in general it's a treasured responsibility, you are free to follow your conscience when it comes to your vote. That's a freedom people fought for too. That's what makes this country, or made this country. It's no longer the country that the founding fathers bequeathed us. That's what made it so great. Now, however, if you look at the Christian community, oh God, here we go again. The so-called the cuck Christian, the cuction community this year, you may have gotten the impression that not voting is actually evil and not just anti-American from things like this. Here's a WorldNet Daily headline from Carl I. Payne, P-A-Y-N-E, in case you're wondering. Here's the headline under the heading or category of spiritual warfare: sitting out the election, just what Satan wants. Carl Payne urges voters not to be affected by demon-caused passivity. Hey, dude, have you considered... Are you familiar with the concept of false Christs that Jesus warned us would come among us, not just in the world, but within the church, who would lead away, if possible, even the elect, i.e. the church, i.e. evangelical true believers in Jesus Christ? Because you're being led astray, Mr. Payne. Again, what is more insidious? The enemy within, who convinces you that he's one of us and that he's your champion? Or the enemy outside the gate, who is open about the fact that they're your enemy? That's why Trump is more dangerous than Hillary. Hillary is out there. Hillary is ineffective. Hillary is incompetent. Yeah, Hillary is evil, but she's incompetent too. She would be Jimmy Carter. She would not be Barack Obama. It would be easy to unify an opposition to her, because everybody knows who is what and who's on what side. Everybody knows where they stand. Donald Trump is an enemy within, who's convinced, obviously, he's deceived a lot of so-called Christians like Carl Payne that he's one of them when he's not. He's turned Carl Payne. Donald Trump hasn't changed. It's people like Carl Payne that have changed. It's people like Carl Payne that have been deceived by Satan into believing that Donald Trump is something that... into believing in fantasy Trump. Then there's this article from Christian Post. New Spirit Revival Center Church pastor Reverend Daryl Scott declared yesterday that there is a concentrated satanic attack being waged against Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. Trump is the devil's advocate, Reverend, who is believed by some evangelicals to be God's choice for president. Jesus himself said, "My kingdom is not of this world," ladies and gentlemen. Jesus said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's. There is no such thing as God's choice for president in the sense of God being partisan in our elections. Do you really think that God needs Donald Trump to accomplish his purpose and his plan? Good Lord, God can use anybody. God can use our enemies. And God's, what does it also say in Scripture? It is also written, our thoughts are not God's thoughts. Our ideas are not his ideas. We are to conform to his ideas, his thoughts. How arrogantly presumptuous of Daryl Scott to try to conform God's plans to ours, God's thoughts to his, Trumpligans. You know, it's Daryl Scott that's being used by the devil. There's no satanic attack on Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the spearhead of the satanic attack, the satanic deception. You want to go down that road, pal? I'll be happy to oblige. Well-known evangelical Christian, so-called, political activist and founder of Wall Builders. Wall Builders? Wall Builders? Oh my God. You know how you see certain end-time prophecies and you wonder, how would that manifest itself? Especially the one about, in the last days, perilous times will come, false Christs will lead astray and deceive, if possible, even the elect. And I always used to wonder, how's that possibly going to manifest itself? Here it is. David Barton urged Christians on the fence about voting for Trump to stop making excuses? What, you mean that Trump is as bad as Hillary Clinton? Trump is as evil as Hillary Clinton? Trump is being used by Satan to deceive Christians? Those aren't excuses, those are facts, pal. He said he is confident Trump is God's choice for president because of the record number of Christians who voted for him in the Republican primaries. Well, that's a fallacy. That's a tautology. That's circular reasoning if I ever heard it. Hey, Mr. Barton, could it possibly be that the record number of Christians who voted for Trump in the Republican primaries were deceived, were wrong? Now, that's not to say that it's not necessarily God's will that Trump wins. If he does, obviously, nothing can happen that isn't God's will. God's will is never and can never be thwarted. Our problem, I struggle with this, given my ongoing predicament, is forgetting that what we want, our plan, not necessarily God's plan, and if something's not going our way, well, that's the way God wanted it. For some reason, we don't know. We are such a small, each and every one of us is such an infinitesimal, I'll get the word out, part of God's overall plan. So none of us should ever overestimate our part in that plan. We should seek God's will and seek the Holy Spirit's empowerment to live a godly life as the Scriptures particularly the New Testament, sets forth. So, I mean, it could be that it's God's will that Trump wins. I mean, if Trump does win, well, then obviously that's what God willed to happen. But you got to remember, sometimes God wills things to happen. Sometimes God's plan has things happen in order to punish. I mean, it may be God's will that Trump wins, but Trump may be a judgment, not a blessing. He may be God's discipline, not God's answer to prayer. Be careful what you wish for, in other words. You see this beyond the religious community, too. Republicans and conservatives alike will tell you that Republicans and cuck-servatives alike will tell you that you must vote for president. We can't let Hillary win the White House. Not voting for Trump helps Hillary win. It's all bullshit. If the GOP wanted a better chance of beating Hillary, then they should have nominated someone else, which in turn indicates that nominating Trump was never, ever about stopping Hillary Clinton. It was about burning down the GOP. Period. All this business of, oh, now we got to stop Hillary. That's the excuse. That's the excuse. And it's part of the, satanic subversion of the GOP. And so many Christians, so-called, along with it. Here's the truth, ladies and gentlemen. You have just as much of a right not to vote as you have to vote. Not choosing is also a choice. And it's not a binary choice either. Come election day, people will share the news that they voted and will take selfies wearing those insipid shaped oval stickers that announce that. In fact, back when I actually had the privilege of going to a polling place and voting, as opposed to dropping it in the mail, which I hate. I don't feel like I voted. I feel like I paid a bill. Boy, that's a great metaphor, isn't it? But when I fed my ballot into the machine, it would spit out one of those stickers. And it was almost like they wouldn't leave, the precinct officers wouldn't let you leave the building until you took your dumb little sticker. I just tossed them in the trash. I don't need to, hey, I voted! Who needs to do that? I thought it was supposed to be a secret ballot anyway, crying out loud. I mean, if the very fact that you showed up indicated you were voting, right? Besides, every place nowadays is under electronic surveillance anyway. But even now, if you say you're not voting, others look down on you for the reasons mentioned earlier. They may think you don't care or are uninformed. Of course, how are they going to know if you didn't vote for president? If you went in, and especially nowadays with vote by mail, I mean, you fill out your ballot on at your kitchen table or in your den or whatever. And how would they know if you chose not to vote for president? Let's say you voted the rest of the race is down the ballot. You cast a ballot. You didn't vote for president. How are they going to know? They may think you don't care or are uninformed. Oh, the irony of that accusation. For many non-voters this year, the opposite is and will be true. They are too informed about what stands before us to feel comfortable voting for either major party candidate. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that in 2016 is the highest form of patriotism. If patriotism is wanting what's best for your country, you cannot vote for either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. One or the other of them is going to win. Most likely Mrs. Clinton. But You don't have to leave your fingerprints on America's corpse by doing so. Now, Kimberly Ross hasn't yet decided what she's going to do once Election Day comes. She may do a write-in as her own protest vote, or she may abstain from choosing someone entirely. But one thing is for certain, she and I and all of you should not choose Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Since one of the two of them will win, this means that we won't actually be choosing our next president. And you know what? We have both the right to choose neither and the right to complain about the final results. You see, voting is an excellent way for citizens to participate in determining the course of our country's future. And as a female citizen, Kimberly Ross is proud to have such an exercise at her disposal. However, well, I don't know, being a female citizen, I'm proud to have that exercise at my disposal as well. However, consciously choosing to not vote for the president is just as much of a choice, and it's just as much of a right, and it's just as important. You're exercising your freedom and declaring that, yes, we can do much, much better. Here's where I differ with Kimberly Ross. There is somebody to vote for who would make a fine president. He's not going to win. But if you are going to follow Ted Cruz's original advice, Evan McMullin is your man.
I'm Evan McMullin, and I'm running for president. I love coming to the monuments late at night because they help me reflect on why I and others have risked so much for our independence and for the ideals that we now hold dear: equality, life, the pursuit of happiness. This is the greatest country on earth. We should never let leaders divide us along racial lines, along religious lines, or in any other way. We must remember that despite our differences, we can be united as Americans.